Hello, Internet. It is Adam Malik Aaron. Welcome back to my fall 2019 box office predictions. And today we're going to be talking about Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. We're going to talk about its pros and cons when it comes to its box office. So let's get to it. Pros: this movie's being released by Disney, and unless you've been living under a rock, 2019 will forever be known as the year that the House of Mouse dominated. And the proof is right here. So the top 6 movies, yes, I'm including Spider-Man, because even though Spider-Man is still owned by Sony, the movie was co-produced by Marvel Studios, who's owned by Disney, so the movie still has a Disney connection to it, so it counts in my book. With that being said, the top 6 movies all had a Disney connection to them, and all made over $1 billion. All 6. No other studio has been able to do that this year. In fact, of all the movies that are pretty much left this year, the only 2 movies that could realistically make $1 billion that were not made by Disney are Joker and Jumanji Next Level. That's it. And even then, it could be a little difficult with movies like Frozen 2 and Rise of Skywalker going to come out. Like those 2 movies combined with the 6 already here, that'll be 8 movies making $1 billion. And they're all from Disney in some form or capacity, which means Disney is going to own the film industry. It's going to have a monopoly over the film industry. And that's a really scary thought. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Maleficent here. So Disney's been having a great year. A absolutely dominant year. So that can help Maleficent out. At least a little bit. Alright. Second pro. The first Maleficent, which was released back in 2014, which feels like an age ago. So first Maleficent, despite some somewhat skepticism about the whole idea of taking the villain from Sleeping Beauty and making her the protagonist, well, at least I wouldn't say protagonist, kind of protagonist, yeah, whatever. They made her an anti-hero. That's the best way of saying it. Despite all that, the movie was a massive hit, opened to $69 million at the end of May 2014. Made $241 million domestic, $758 million worldwide. And, it was one of the few bright spots to what was a truly terrible year that was 2014. I mean, 2014, don't get me wrong, it had some amazing movies. But in terms of money, it was weak. Extremely weak. You see, this was before Disney just controlled everything. Well, at least this is about a year before they start to control everything. So yeah, and despite the first Maleficent having a so-so reputation, it does have its fans. I don't know how many there are, but I do know they exist. So the sequel has that going for it. Alright, the third pro, I'm not sure if this is exactly a pro, but the thing is, this movie was supposed to be released next year. Next May. Yeah, it's going to be a summer movie again. But then all of a sudden, Disney decided to push the film up a whopping 7 months. That rarely happens. Most of the time when a movie changes its release date, it usually gets pushed back because of reshoots, delays, marketing issues, test screenings, you name it. A competition, all that stuff. It's usually movies get pushed back. They don't get pushed forward, especially like this. So Disney must either have some level of confidence in this, or they just want to just push it out there and just get it over with. That way they can move on to bigger and better things. The second option is looking more likely, now that I think about it. I guess the final pro is, Angelina Jolie. I mean, sure, she's had her problems, her personal problems, bunch of tabloid stuff with Brad Pitt and divorce. I don't want to get into all that stuff because that's just not my thing. But, she definitely has her fans. even though like her most, you know, profitable genre is action films, you know, such as Wanted, Salt, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This obviously isn't. It's more. It's not an action film. It's a fantasy, so it's not the same. But you know, she's the reason why the first Maleficent was such a hit in the first place, because that movie was all about her. So you know, I consider her a pro for this movie, because if she's the reason why the first one was a hit, she'll be the reason why this one makes even a little bit of money. Now for the cons. It's been 5 years since the first movie, and I've said like the ideal time to release a sequel is 2 to 3 years. Sometimes sooner than that. 5 years is extreme, and we've seen that a couple times this year, because I think if I recall, there are 3 other movies that had a 5-year gap between their sequels. And they all came out this year. And those 3 movies were Lego Movie 2, How to Train Your Dragon 3, and Godzilla 2. Of those 3, only How to Train Your Dragon 3 did well. Lego Movie 2 bombed. Godzilla 2 bombed. Even How to Train Your Dragon 3 fell off from its predecessor. So that is horrible. And there is a incredibly high chance. In fact, actually, let's rephrase that. This movie has a negative infinity chance at beating its predecessor. Because, I mean, the first film had a prime summer release date. This one's just in the middle of October. And sometimes, you know, October can be lucrative. I mean, look at last year. You had Venom. You had Halloween. You had A Star Is Born. But I feel like the big event movie, you know, Joker, has kind of, you know, sucked out a lot of the hype out of all the movies that are coming out this month. And, you know, Maleficent just looks like that thing. It's just there. Another thing that's going against this movie is, like, the first film, did it really need a sequel? I mean, honestly, financially, I understand why they would make a sequel. But in terms of creatively, like, what's the point? Like, seriously, what is the point of making a sequel to this other than to make money? This movie's essentially a cash grab. Because there's no real reason other than money to even make this thing. And another thing is these Disney live action reimaginings. That's what they're calling it. Now, in terms of box office, these are mostly indestructible. As we've seen, you know, Lion King and Aladdin, despite getting a lot of hate online, both made over $1 billion. But the thing is, earlier this year, you may have forgotten this, Dumbo came out, and it was the only Disney film this year so far to bomb, and it bombed hard. And, you know, originally I thought, the failure of Dumbo is going to hurt Aladdin, and it didn't. And it didn't hurt Lion King either. But I do kind of think it will hurt Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Because, you know, the first Maleficent, again, had a real so-so reputation. And, you know, I think with Dumbo and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, I think it'll just show people that these remakes or reimaginings, they're not invincible in the slightest, okay? Especially if they don't look too good. If they just feel like Disney's just kind of throwing them out there instead of, you know, pushing as hard as they could, that's a bad sign. Oh, another thing. The last time Disney tried to, you know, do a sequel to one of their live action reimaginings, last time they did that, they made Alice Through the Looking Glass. This thing. Now, if you look at the first Alice in Wonderland, this was the first. Well, I mean, on here it's like, but what about the 101 Dalmatians movies and the Jungle Book movie that nobody remembers? But to most people's knowledge, this was the one right here that kicked off this whole trend. That movie made $1 billion way back in 2010, which, $1 billion in 2010 is way more impressive than $1 billion in 2019. So made all this money, right? 6 years later, you make a sequel. Like, wow. It made less than a third. Less than a third of the first. That's awful. And again, just like Maleficent, the first Alice in Wonderland got meh reviews. This one got worse reviews, and it did just horrific. Now, I don't think Maleficent 2 is going to do this bad. I hope not. It'll do at least a tad bit better than that, but I don't see it being a strong grosser either, at least compared to the first. So overall, opening weekend wise, it has no chance of reaching 69 million. That's a pipe dream. I think 40 million is a more likely number. So I'm just going to say 40 million around that mark. If it does lower than that, then forget it. This movie's a dud. At least domestically it is. It could save some face overseas, but who knows. So it'll make around 40 million opening weekend. Probably in and around 110 million, maybe 120 if it's lucky. Which is very weak, especially for these Disney live action reimaginings. And it would be around half of the first, which, it fits right in with a lot of 2019 sequels. Movies like, Lego Movie 2, Godzilla 2, Dark Phoenix, Secret Life of Pets, Happy Death Day 2, Men in Black International. It fits right in with that group. And you do not want to be associated with that group at all. Not in the slightest. So, Disney, word of advice, when it comes to these live action reimaginings, I suggest with all these movies, you should just keep them as one and dones. Just one movie only, because when you're trying to make sequels to these, it screams cash grab, and nobody buys it. They didn't buy it with Alice Through the Looking Glass, and there's a high chance they're not going to buy it with this either. So Disney, for your sake and your bottom line, don't make sequels to these movies. Because, everyone knows you're going to continue doing these because they make you a lot of money. But don't make sequels. It's bad. It's a very bad investment. So that's my prediction for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. So next prediction I have to do is Zombieland 2, which, will likely be the more successful sequel coming out this weekend. And then after that, I have to do Black and Blue, Countdown, the current war, and then we're on with the holiday season. And that's going to be infinitely more exciting. So yeah, that is all. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, leave a comment. If you want to check out my other predictions, I have a couple playlists. I have my fall playlist. I have my summer playlist. 2 of those, in fact. My blockbusters and not blockbusters. Once the month is over, I have to do a recap of October. Then I have to start with November and December and so on and so forth. So yeah, that is all, and I am out.